So go ahead. So go ahead and wind up and hit Scott with whatever questions you had.
Okay, so first off, I want to say good for you for like waking up and getting out of Amway and like starting to talk about the tool scam. But I'm really curious about what the process was for you to realize that it was this tool scam where most people were making money. How did it hit you? Like one day? Was it over a course of years? Could you like go really dig into that?
Yes, it goes back to 2005. And my upline diamond, a guy by the name of Bruce and Wendy Anderson, was kicked out of Amway. That's kind of a long story by itself, so I'll skip over the details. But you can Google Bruce Anderson Amway or Bruce Anderson Quickstar, Q-U-I-X-T-A-R. That was the name of Amway back in those days. And you can see some of the things that happened. Not all the things that happened because you only hear one side of the story. So I don't know if that's the whole picture. Actually, I know it's not the whole picture. I just don't know what the rest of the picture is. But anyway, he got kicked out. He started a blog, and he made a comment on that blog saying, the last 5 years, I averaged $350,000 per year. And someone asked him how much of that was Amway and how much was tools. His response was something along the lines of, well, you know, one diamond's income is another diamond's federal tax payment, which is totally off topic, obviously, you know, not coming anywhere near answering the actual question. And so this was my first time on a blog and the first time that I posted a comment on a blog. And I said, hey, Bruce, you're not an Amway anymore. You don't have to answer like a diamond. You can actually just answer the question. And one of his cohorts, a guy by the name of Bobsy Twin, answers up and said, well, I was an emerald and I made about twice as much from tools as I did from Amway. And then Bruce finally came on and he said, yeah, that sounds about right. And so that was the first time that I had heard that they made all this money from tools. And so I immediately stopped buying tools. It was not a, you know, multi-year thing. It was like a millisecond decision that I'm not going to buy any more tools because they had been misleading me for literally 12 years, a dozen years, giving the facade that they were making their lifestyle from Amway, whereas most of it was coming from the tools. So that's kind of the short version of the story. Did that answer your question? Ooh, did we lose Julie? Can you hear me?
Julie dropped off just as you were finishing your answer. So, Julie, you're back?
I'm back.
Okay. So, Scott, I guess, Julie, just the thing that because I saw you drop off, Julie, I think Scott finished where he said he dropped off as soon as he found that out, which is about 12 years in. And then he stopped his tools subscription.
Okay. And then did you leave Amway after that, Scott, or did you still continue to be an IBO?
I decided that I wanted to run a clean Amway business. And so I actually wrote a letter to Rich DeVos, who was alive at that time. And I told him, this is back in 2005, that I was going to develop a clean Amway business, that I was going to buy tools off of eBay and for pennies on the dollar, and also books for almost free that are online, you know, from basically distributors who quit. And I would build up a library. In this library, I would loan out the tools. I would not sell them. I might require some kind of a $10, payment just in case they lose or damage the tool. But I was not looking to make money from that. And that letter, I believe, is on my website that I wrote to Rich DeVos in 2005. And so over the next 2 years, that's what I did. I bought tons of tools. And my rule was I would not pay more than 10 cents for a cassette. Including shipping, and we have some shipping in the United States that's called media mail. It's very inexpensive. Only some things like cassette tapes and books can be shipped in that manner. And so I built up literally tens of thousands of these tools over a 2-year period, hundreds of books. And I decided that after those 2 years that I had enough of a supply that even if my upline cut me off when I got re-involved, that I would have enough to continue, that I would not have to scrounge around for tools in any way. And so I decided I would go back to one of the seminars and also one of the Show the Plan. Actually, I think it was 2 Show the Plan meetings, and see what had changed, because it had been 2 years. I had stopped going to meetings completely. In fact, I told my upline direct, platinum is the modern term, that please take me off standing order tools. And I went from best buddy to complete stranger overnight. I mean, literally, they went silent on me. Not that I wanted to talk to them, but that was the reaction. It was almost like I was a cancer that they were cutting out of their body. They did not want whatever I knew to spread through the organization, because I didn't say, hey, I knew you guys are, making money from tools. I just said, please take me off standing order, period. That was the beginning, middle, and end of the email. But they smelled something, and they wanted to confine the damage, not let that information spread, whatever information I may have had. And so they just completely went silent. So I showed up to these meetings, and in that interim period, and I think not too soon before I went back, my upline, Don Wilson, I think his business was falling apart. And so he glommed on to another person that I had seen in person in years past, a guy by the name of Orrin Woodward. And so Don started using Orrin's tools. So I was actually going to an Orrin Woodward meeting, not a Don Wilson meeting, even though my upline was the same. The tools were from Orrin. And during those 3 meetings, they never said the word Amway or Quickstar. They made it sound as if Orrin and his sidekick, I can't remember the guy's name, Chris Brady was his sidekick's name, that they had developed everything. All of the educational stuff, all of the meetings, all of the products, everything, that they were totally responsible for that. And so I wrote a letter to Amway, an email, and I said, hey, these guys, they're not even mentioning Amway at the very end of the meeting. I mean, that was our normal thing. We would mention Amway at the very end, but they weren't mentioning it at all. It was amazing to me. And so now I don't think this had much to do with them getting kicked out within a month or 2 later, because what happened was Amway announced they were leaving the name Quickstar, which was only in North America between 1999 and 2007. And they were going back to Amway. And so that caused a lot of turmoil. And Orrin and his group, including my upline, approached Amway and said, we want out. We don't want the 6-month and 2-year rules to be enforced, because we're going to a different MLM. And I won't get into those details, just from a time perspective. And Amway said, no, you can't waive the rules. And by the way, you've been terminated. And so there's a question whether or not Orrin and the gang resigned or they were terminated. It doesn't really matter. But they literally the next day filed a 100-page lawsuit in California. Nobody lived in California, but California is a trial-friendly state versus an arbitration-friendly state, and they wanted to go to court, not into arbitration. And so that's sort of some background on what happened. In fact, I just forgot what your actual question was, Julie. Could you ask it again?
That's okay. I think it's good to go with where your story takes you, because it's reflecting back and giving insight to other listeners that are in Amway or other multi-level marketing companies that are hearing their story in your words. So I would like to actually hear a little bit more about, when you started to purchase all of those tools, but you were like, I'm only going to purchase them for 10 cents. Forget it. I'm not going to spend any more money. But then you did start to attend other events with this Orrin Woodward. Is that his name? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Orrin Woodward. Yeah.
Did you find? Oh, sorry. What's that?
No, go ahead.
Did you believe that you needed those tools to grow your Amway business? That was still like vital to develop your mindset, things like that.
Yes, I found that the content in the tools was pretty good. Not that I agreed with everything, but I felt that the content was pretty good, and I do believe in education. Okay, I happen to have an electrical engineering degree. I was in the Navy nuclear power program. I was working at a nuclear power plant at the time, and training was very much emphasized in all of those areas, and I believed in it, and I believed in the ability of the tools to duplicate my time so that I wouldn't have to be there teaching every single minute, every single person, that these tools could be leveraged to be able to get information to them when I could not be there because I'm only one guy. And so there's no way I could do everything. So, yes, I did believe in the tools.
Yeah, and that makes sense, too, because with your background, your education, it's that's what you do. You learn, you apply, and then you do the work. And this is the same thing. You're given these tools, you see the value. Why keep reinventing the wheel? When you do this, then you can teach, your downline, people that you recruit to do the same thing. Like, that totally makes sense. Thank you for explaining it. And I know...
So let me jump... Julie, can I jump in for a second? Because there's a lot of people that may not... And I'd like to ask Scott to clarify what a tool was. For instance, a tool might be... the book Think and Grow Rich, or maybe another book, The Magic of Thinking Big, or maybe another book, whatever it was at that time. And then another tool would be like an audio cassette, which was a Diamond or somebody talking about how they went from rags to riches. Scott, were most of your tools Amway specific, like an audio cassette that had no application anywhere else? Or were they self-development kind of specific, maybe like a book, like a Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or something like that?
It varied, Peter. The books, they were from all over the place. Some of them were Amway authors. Some of them were authors that were not in Amway, but they wrote about Amway. Some were, like you said, Think and Grow Rich, that had nothing to do with Amway. They were written before Amway was even started. So they were that kind of a, attitude sort of a book. Now the cassette tapes, same thing. Most of them, I would say, were Amway-centric, but there were some of those tapes and CDs that were also, they actually had 3 cassette tapes or CDs per week that you could buy. You didn't have to buy all 3, but you could, and we did. There was a normal recording. There was what they would call a leadership recording, a little bit more hardcore, and the third one was a inspirational. And so it could have been related to Amway. It was, basically a Christian message, or it could have been just a completely separate, Christian recording that somebody made, and they brought that recording, into the Amway tools. So, yeah, it was all over the place as far as what it was directed to and where it came from. It was quite a variety as far as the source of it.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. When was the final break from Amway? Because I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, so what happened was, so these guys got kicked out. They sue Amway, and so I tried to work with Amway to, and in fact, this is another interesting piece of this, was after I wrote that letter to Rich DeVos, of course, he didn't answer me back. I wouldn't have expected him to. But I got both a phone call and an email from some other Amway people, and I thought, they're going to maybe help me here. Maybe they'll support me. Because one of the things I said was, whatever, I'm not looking for a handout, but whatever assistance you can give me, I'm open to it. And so they answered me back. Now, in hindsight, they were only trying to gather more information. They had no intent of helping me. And so for the next 2 years, from 2007, when I went to these meetings, when I started these meetings again, which only lasted 3 of them because then they got kicked out, I was trying to reconnect with somebody in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I lived at the time to get into their meetings. Because one of the things I mentioned in this letter was I'm going to go to these monthly seminars once a quarter, and use those as our major functions. And then the other 8 months, I was going to hold my own seminars internal to my organization, because I'm a big believer in live type things, whether it's a sporting event or, maybe musician, whatever. To me, it's a much bigger impact. It's much more impressive when you're there in person than just listening to it on a recording or even watching it on TV. It doesn't have the same impact. The live part really is meaningful, I believe. And that was the reason I wanted to go to the seminars. Of course, the seminars were local. They weren't across the country like the major functions are, where you spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, between the tickets and the travel and the meals and the hotel. And so it was going to be a much lower overhead for my group to do that. And so I would ask Amway, can you help me find somebody in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that has seminars? And they sort of delayed. They said, well, this is still kind of up in the air, this whole lawsuit thing, and just hang in there. We'll get around. We'll get back to you. And some months would go on. I would ask the question again, and they kept putting me off and putting me off. And then eventually I just got fed up with it. And actually about a year into this, there was it's a biennial, every other year, Amway gets all of their public relations people together from around the world. And me and I think 4 other people that were very active on their blogs, on Amway's blogs at the time, were invited. And this particular meeting was in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And so Amway flew all of us out there. They put us up in the hotel. They fed us. Everything was paid for. And we had a session for about an hour and a half, I believe, in front of all of the, I guess it was 50 or 60 public relations people from around the world, where we would, our main focus of that meeting was, what do we think, and this is back in 2008 now, so this is a long time ago, what do we think are the major impacts of social media on Amway? And so that was the discussion topic, because we were making comments on Amway's blogs. Now, at the beginning, we were allowed to say anything we wanted. And so I took about a minute or two, and I put a piece of paper in the front of my table. I even brought a piece of Scotch tape with me and taped it to the table to make sure everybody could see it. And it was a big red circle with a horizontal line, and the words were "tool scam." So it was no tool scam. And I just ragged on Amway. I said, and at this point, I did not realize Amway was in on it. And I said, if you guys don't control this, it's gonna be, the failure of your business. If you don't get a handle on this, it's going to be a big mess. It's getting bigger and bigger. The internet is putting more and more information out there, and you better get a hold of it, because these guys are scamming us. And so that was sort of my 1 minute rant, I guess, at the beginning of this hour and a half session. We were there for like 3 days, but we only had an hour and a half as far as our presentation. So anyway, they knew who I was anyway from their blogs. They knew I was on this tool scam campaign even before I went to Prague. So it wasn't a surprise to them. I guess it was a surprise maybe to some of the public relations people that hadn't known about me. But anyway, I continued to try to work with Amway. One of the things that I did was I was developing a presentation, which, by the way, is required to be approved by Amway. You cannot come up with your own presentation. It has to be approved by the company. And so I was trying to push through this presentation, which was actually very similar to the ones I've used before, and they kept putting roadblocks in front of me. They kept saying, well, you got to change this, you got to do that, and they would never sort of get back to me. I would send them something, and then I would wait for 2 or 3 weeks to go by, maybe a month. I'd get no answer. I'd contact them again, and then they go, oh yeah, let's look at that again, and then they come up with something new. So it was this whole delay thing, both finding an upline in the area as well as getting my presentation approved, which, by the way, a new person could not do. All right, there's no way a new person could develop a presentation that was anywhere near that would be effective. It would be according to Amway's rules. It would take them months just to come up with a presentation. It's impossible, in my opinion. But anyway, I just got really fed up with Amway, and there was this other blog that I had been posting on, and there was this woman on there that we just didn't get along very well on the blog, and she made a comment one time that I'm anti-business, and that really struck me because I'm not anti-business. I'm actually pro-business. If you do it right, then I'm pro-business. If you do it wrong, I'm anti-business. You're right. And so I called her a bitch. And then there was another guy on another blog that was picking on another guy, and telling him all kinds of crazy stuff. And I knew from experience, from being on blogs for years, that the only way to put down a bully is to out-bully them. And so he made it well known that he was Jewish, not Jewish religion, but Jewish heritage. And so I called him, it rhymes with a kite, right? Like Benjamin Franklin with a kite, but it's not quite that word. And I called him that over and over again, and he finally backed down, because I found people will back down if you keep on them long enough, repetitively enough. And so Amway sent me an email saying, we don't like you using those words, as an IBO. We don't like you using that language. And I was like, okay, well, if you guys clean up language on that website that other people are using similar words, then I'll clean up my language. And of course they did not. Amway did not. And so this language continued on these other blogs. And so I just got fed up at that point. I got to the point where I knew Amway was not going to help me. All they were doing is delaying things, getting in my knickers,